What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Modern video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Goryo's Vengeance deck for the Modern format, a deck that is a very nice 1-2 punch for the Modern metagame and has ways to kind of get around some of the drawbacks of the cards that it is playing in the deck and, you know, just further put you behind if you're not able to interact with it in any meaningful way. And it actually has some pretty nice additions from Modern Horizons 3 as well that probably should be in the main deck, but you know, I think in general, like you'll get the idea of what this list is doing, and of course when we get later in the week where we actually get our hands on this deck and hopefully end up doing the thing. But before we get into what that thing is and go over the ins and outs of the Goryo's Vengeance deck, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me, where we focus mainly on the Modern and Pioneer format as well as some longer form videos, so if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. It's a free, easy way to support me and my content, and I have some very special things planned when we get to 1,000 subscribers, which seems like it's going to happen sooner rather than later. So if you want to kind of figure out what all that stuff is and be a part of it, you know, you got to make sure you subscribe and things like that. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk Goryo's Vengeance in the Modern format. The main draw to playing this deck and, you know, where it gets its name is the card Goryo's Vengeance. So for 1 and a black, you have an instant arcane spell, which, you know, I guess technically matters if you have other copies of Goryo's Vengeance, but normally it's not going to come up. But you can return target legendary creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature gains haste. You exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So we're trying to get, you know, Atraxa, which has been kind of the reanimator creature of choice for the style of decks, whether you're playing like Legacy and you're trying to use like Animate Dead, or in this case for the Modern format, you know, Goryo's Vengeance. It's been amazing. So it's a 7 mana, 7/7 Flying Vigilance, Death Touch, lifelink creature. When it enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 10 cards of your library, and for each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the reveal cards into your hand. Put the rest of them in the bottom of your library in a random order. So this essentially means you flip over 10 cards, you can get 1 creature, 1 land, 1 instant, sorcery, so on. You go through all the card types like that, and you can get 1 of those to your hand. Well, this deck isn't necessarily putting like tons of cards in its hand, because really it just has like lands, creatures, some of the spells like instant sorceries. You're going to be able to put like, I believe 4 cards is like the max that you're going to be able to put in your hand. Either way, like this is definitely basically almost feels like a demonic tutor in a way, because I mean you're looking at 10 cards. Chances are you're going to be able to find something to kind of continue like this chain of getting 2 Goryo Vengeance things back. Or in this case, if you wait until like turn 3, you can Goryo's Vengeance back in Atraxa, or even like a Gristlebrand or an Ulamog, and then you can ephemerate it, which says that you can exile a target creature you control, return to the battlefield under its owner's control, and it has rebound. So in this way, you're able to get around the clause that says that Goryo's Vengeance will exile it at the beginning of the next end step, because when you exile something and return it back to the battlefield, it is considered a whole new object. It doesn't have any of the previous things attached to it. So Goryo's Vengeance exile at the next end step doesn't really count. For what it's worth, also, like you can Goryo's Vengeance on your opponent's end step as well. Say that you mill an Atraxa with like a Surveil land on your turn 1. Turn 2, you can play land, say go. Your opponent does their turn 2. You Goryo's Vengeance back on the end step, which means that at the beginning of the next end step on your turn, then you're going to have to, exile the Atraxa or Gristlebrand or what have you, whatever creature you end up getting back. But then you're able to ephemerate it. Of course, you get to dig like 11 cards deep as well. You know, the 10 that you get from Atraxa plus your draw step. So chances are you're going to be able to find an ephemerate, or you're going to find another Goryo's Vengeance in a way to put like a Gristlebrand, Ulamog, or another Atraxa into your graveyard, and then kind of continue the process of doing that. So step 1, how the heck are we getting these cards in our graveyard? Because while that's all fine and good, you know, we have to have ways of actually, you know, putting these in the graveyard. So some of the easier ways, and more than likely some of the turn 1 plays that you're going to making, is like going and fetching like Meticulous Archive, Hedge Maze, Shadowy Backstreet. These lands are the Surveil lands from the Murders at Karlov Manor set, and it turns out they've been pretty good. And this is like a way that, you know, I guess if you get pretty lucky, you can mill one of these creatures on turn 1, and then that kind of enables like the turn 2, you know, on your opponent's end step, Goryo's Vengeance the thing back, and then you'll be able to attack with it and kind of, you know, do the things that you want to do with it. So like that's step 1. Step 2, and the more likely way, and the way that you can set up kind of like these turn 3 where you get it, attack, and then ephemerate it, is with Philology Archaeologist, which for 1 and a blue, you get an 0/3, and when it enters, you mill 3, and then you may put a non-creature non-land card from among the mill cards in your hand. If you don't, you put a +1/+1 counter on the Archaeologist. So you can choose not to bring something back, and then you can get a 1/4. Most of the time, you're going to have a 0/3, and it's going to help you find any one of these other spells in here. Whether it finds like Faithful Mending or Tainted Indulgence, which is another way that we can get cards into our graveyard, where we get to draw 2 and then discard 1 for Tainted Indulgence, and then 2 for the Faithful Mending, and we get to gain a little bit of life as well. But the Archaeologist can help us find these things, or just mill over an Atraxa, Gristlebrand, or Ulamog itself, and be able to, set us up to Goryo's Vengeance on the next turn with Ephemerate up, so that we can not only save our creature, but also, protect it as well if our opponent is playing any kind of removal. So this deck, I said, had like kind of a 1-2 punch. So that's obviously plan A. We have a few different ways. Plan B, in sort of kind of the newer technology, I think, for the deck. And I'm going to say newer because I believe like the original, like when this first started coming out, like didn't play Priest of the Foulright. So it's a black and a white for a 2/2 human warlock, where you can tap it, pay 3 life, and you sacrifice it, and you return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. You only activate as a sorcery, and it has Unearth for 3, a white and a black. So this is like a way that you can, just get something back permanently. It's not going to have haste, but you don't have to worry about ephemerating it, or, because it'll get exiled at the end step or what have you. So that's kind of like, I guess, plan 1A, or it fits into kind of that like Reanimator style thing, where like you can play this on turn 2, and then like turn 3, you're able to kind of like main phase some of these draw discard spell effects, or even Philology like Archaeologist. And then if you end up like milling into one of these creatures, then you can just bring it back. It also doesn't have the restriction that Goryo's Vengeance has of getting back a creature. So if you really need to, you can go and get like the Archaeologist. You can go get an Emperor Bones if you want, because this is also like a way that you can kind of get things back, but instead they're exiled with the Emperor Bones. Doesn't work nearly as well, because I believe with a finality counter, I think if it goes anywhere, I think it just goes to exile anyway. Probably doesn't. I would imagine that it works the way that you would intend it to. But you can go and also get like Grief. You can go get Solitude. Subtlety really wouldn't be that good, but you can go and get these things, removal, discard, or if you just need a flying threat, you can go get a Subtlety as well. Ephemerate also works really well with the elemental creatures that we were just talking about, because you can scam your opponent on turn 1. It might not be, the normal thing. This is kind of what people thought of when they, heard of Grief, or when Grief was printed back in MH2, was Grief plus Ephemerate. So you can just, get your opponents like 2 cards out of their hand right away, and then you have the option of doing it a third time as well, without getting in for 3 damage. And some would say that that is pretty good. So like Ephemerate definitely has a lot of utility, because it's going to be able to exile, one of the creatures that you Goryo's Vengeance back, get with Emperor Bones, or protect it if you get it back with Priest of the Foulrights, and double up on, Atraxa's ETB trigger. Or you can just end up scamming your opponent with Grief, solituding to get rid of like 2 creatures, and then of course you get a 3/2 lifelink around, which is going to help you stabilize it pretty quickly, and at least give you a few extra turns to kind of set up for one of these Goryo's Vengeance turns. Subtlety as well is just a very good answer to some very problematic creatures in the set. You definitely want some ways to interact with Nadu that aren't technically counter spells because of the 1/2, the Delighted Halfling, because of that card. Interestingly enough, too, because there obviously are some other spells, we'll get to those in a second. I believe with Ulamog the Defiler, if you end up ephemerating this, it'll come back with 10 counters, because I believe how it ends up checking, and like when it enters the battlefield, it's not like a trigger, it just enters with the counters. And Ulamog was like exiled, so I believe it comes in as like a 17/17 with Annihilator 10. So it's the same thing, I believe, if you do it with like Emperor Bones as well. If you exile it and then you adapt the Emperor Bones and then bring back the Ulamog, then it's going to be a 17/17 Annihilator 10. Chances are your opponent is either not going to have any permanents left, or no life total left, so that's pretty cool. It also just works very well, with Gristlebrand and Atraxa, because they are, a 7 cost and an 8 cost thing. So even if you make it a 14/14 or a 15/15 with Annihilator 7 or Annihilator 8, you're just going to have to live with it. But chances are if Annihilator 6 was plenty good enough for a lot of decks and hitting for 15, then I'm sure Annihilator 7 plus hitting for 14 or Annihilator 8 for 15 is going to be pretty damn good. There's some other kind of like disruption spells. We have like Prismatic Ending. That's kind of why you're playing like the Hedge Maze in the deck, because it does allow you to Prismatic Ending for 4, so you can hit opposing 1 rings. This also, like the Hedge Maze, also has like some utility in helping you cast like Atraxa later in the game, so it's sort of kind of free and it's doing something that you want to do anyway. Of course, we have 1 Thoughtseize in the main as well as some disruption. We've went over the Faithful Mending, Tainted Indulgence, Goryo's Vengeance, 2 Force Negation as like a way that you can protect from opposing Thoughtseizes, because of course you don't care if your big things get discarded, but they're relatively uncastable, so you're trying to protect like your Goryo's Vengeance, maybe your Tainted Indulgence or Faithful Mending, to make sure that you're able to cast them on the turn that you need them, and end up setting up for kind of these big reanimator turns. Waterlog Teaching is a land that's going to come and play tapped. It's going to give you blue or black mana, and it allows you to search for an instant or a card with flash, put it to your hand, which is like a way that we can look for Goryo's Vengeance, and of course is a land when you need it to be. And again, like there's not a lot of plays that we want to make on turn 1. Of course, we have some pretty good turn 1 plays, but we don't necessarily need to, so the fact that this comes into play tapped is totally fine if it's in your opening hand. Of course, we have plenty of fetch lands, the Flood Strands. The Surveil lands are kind of the main point of the deck. There is no Boseiju in the main. Of course, you are more Esper than anything, but, like most people that can support Boseiju in some way end up playing it, so just wouldn't be surprised. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be ideal, but, it is what it is. Anyway, the sideboard. And we have Cosign of Memory, which has been like the premier like blue card in sideboards, just to help deal with triggered abilities or colorless spells. So this is like a Storm Hate piece, plus being able to counter like a colorless spell as well. Nihil Spellbomb for some graveyard hate, Celestial Purge for those annoying black or red permanents. We have 3 Psychic Frog. So, like, this is also a pretty sweet addition. I think something that should be in the main board for a lot of these decks, just for the fact that you can discard cards to it at will. You're going to put +1/+1 counter on it. It's going to deal damage to your opponent. It's going to help you draw cards, and then you can exile cards from your graveyard to give Psychic Frog flying, which has a little bit of utility with something like Ulamog the Defiler, because, you can end up exiling, Gristlebrand or Atraxa in your graveyard to give this flying, and then you can end up bringing it back, and more than likely between the Defiler and the Frog, you're going to be able to cobble together lethal and kill your opponent that way. 2 Wrathless Guys. I think this is like more of like a Nadu thing, because like for 2 white you can just end up wrathing the board full of their tokens, and of course ramp it up even farther. You don't really have any other like energy kind of like payoffs. Really, like the first wrath can help power out a second one later for 2 mana if you just want to invest a little bit of mana into this. Teferi Time Raveler in the Sweet Bloomburrow bird art. This is just a way to like force your opponent to have like activated abilities to interact with you rather than spells, which can be pretty good when you're also bringing in Psychic Frog, because then you can just discard Gristlebrand, Ulamog, Atraxa, whatever, put counters on the Psychic Frog, and then bring it back. And of course, 1 Toxic Deluge for the Boros deck. So that is the Goryo's Vengeance deck for the modern format. I look forward to playing this deck because of the fact that it is doing something very powerful, and you can just kind of get people, if you will. And I think that's the most fun part about it. But that's gonna do it for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Comment down below what modern deck you would like to see kind of featured on one of these deck tech videos. Of course, subscribe and notification bell if you want to see more videos about Goryo's Vengeance deck or the modern and pioneer format in general. I really do appreciate all the support. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.